Welcome to Timberborn. My name is Zedek, and this is the settlement of the Skyborn. If you're new to this series, I've been building a settlement of mega structures. We've got vertical farming, vertical housing, vertical food production, and even a vertical water tower. What we are missing, though, is vertical industry. And over the last couple of episodes, I've completely gutted all of our original industry and started to build a new giant industrial warehouse. And that is my goal for this episode. After 2 episodes of clearing out everything we had there, building our foundation and subfloor, I want to wrap this up and have it fully functional. Let's start with a quick recap of where this build is so far. So on this map, I've got the map divvied up into roughly 4 quadrants. I've got most of the city up here in the top right, our old original start of our colony in the bottom left, and our industrial district over here. You can see I've got this nice giant power plant that is powering the entire city off a bad water pump, and this is ultimately powered by all the bad water sources in the map, connected via pipes. Now, for our industrial zone, for the longest time, this has been built on top of the ground. And given that the theme of this build has been towers, I wanted to make a nice industrial warehouse that fit the theme everywhere else. And so a couple of episodes ago, I tore everything down and started to build this structure. The idea is that I'm going to reserve the ground to be a nature reserve or something like that, and up on this main floor is going to be where we're going to put all of our industrial factories. And one of the key parts of this design that I really wanted to do was a subfloor. And the idea of the subfloor is that by putting platforms down here, I could put all our power shafts underneath the subfloor and just bring them up wherever I need them to be. Now what you see here is not the permanent structure. We ran out of planks in this construction, so I just threw down a bunch of plank production facilities to get things going. But this building is not complete. We still need to put a roof on it, and ideally some area for storage for all our intermediate products. That's where I'm going to start for this episode. I'd like at least to put down the foundation for the next floor. That way I know where the pillars are, and then I will be able to actually fill in all the other space with the factories and whatnot that we need. Now, if you watched the end of my last episode on the Skyborn, I was toying with 2 different possible builds here. One of them was looking at making this like a giant aircraft hangar, where I created dirt and I made it into an arch-like pattern. I'm not going to do it completely this way, but you can imagine something like this, where I had a giant arch and it just ran the entire length of the building. That was one option I was toying with. And the other option I was toying with was something a little bit more industrial looking, where it looked more like a regular warehouse with a giant arch and a flat roof. Something a little bit more traditional looking like this. Imagining that I have that arch completed. There was a lot of discussion over in the comments, but I think ultimately I'm going to go for a hybrid of the two. I like more of this industrial look for this industrial building, given that's what the rest of this playthrough has been about. But instead of leaving it bare, I'm going to make it covered with dirt at the very top. And so my idea is that we are going to have this big giant open warehouse in here. And from the inside, you should be able to look down and see everything. But then up on top, I'm going to cover it with dirt, get water up here somehow. And then from there, we're going to be able to make a garden or fill it in with a farm or something. And on top of all this paradise, on top of the roof, I'm going to put, I think, different storage. Some intermediate storage like this to hold all the goods from the factory floor. And then there'll be elevator shafts that go up to the roof so that beavers can get there from the factory floor and then go right back down to working again. That's roughly what I'm thinking. So we got a mix of factory and farms all together. So, that said, let's figure out how to get the shape of this arch done. I think the other thing that we can see that I'm going to have to work around is this shape of the building isn't perfectly square. And that's because I've got this cutout to accommodate our giant water tower. So one of the things I'm looking at doing is I probably am going to have to use dirt again just to make a little bit of space over here so that I can work off of. There we go. The other thing I'm going to do is, once I put these pillars down, it's going to be very difficult to take them off. So anything like this, where I have a tubeway, I want to be careful about the building on top of that. I think I'm going to replace it with a platform like that, so I eventually have the option of taking away that tubeway if I ever decide to move things around. But that planned, let's see if we can get the shape of this going. Okay, here is the start of the arch. I still need to figure out this part here, but let's take a look at this. This arch, ideally, this is going to be one column. The next column is going to be somewhere in here. So that would roughly line up, unfortunately, where this tubeway station is. Well, we can figure that out. But let's see what shape this is going to have to require. Right away, I'm seeing something I'm going to have to change here. You can see I'm going to run into a problem where I can't have a crossbeam going in 2 directions here. Now, what I could do is I could always put one of these platforms here to split it and go back and forth like this. Problem is, it does create a lot of excess overhangs this direction. You can see the way I got around this down here is I used properties of dirt where I could build overhangs off of the column. And I could do that here as well. I'm just deciding whether or not I want to. One of the nice things if I do this is it gives me I don't know, maybe a platform that I could put decorations on from outside. It's just a very small overhang, but that is something I could do. You know, this build is pretty bare bones otherwise, so I think I'm going to go with that. I don't really use these 3x3 platforms that much, so I'm curious how that's going to look. But if that's the plan, we could just visit each of these areas and just try to replicate that setup. Like that. Okay, not too bad. Now, one of the things I think I'm going to adjust is, now that I see this, I'd like a bigger height difference between the side here and this roof. So maybe what we could do is increase the height of this. Just one more block, I think would look a little bit better. Okay, just slightly better. The other change you might have noticed that I'm looking at is I realized I don't need pillars everywhere in here. The only pillars I need are the very outside on this design. So you can see once we're in here, this is a very wide open atrium, which I really like. It's like a Grand Central Station or something. Oh, and before I forget, let's go over here and make that same adjustment I made everywhere else and use that 3x3 overhang. Yeah, I think this is going to look interesting. I really should mess around with these 3x3 overhangs more than I do. I've gotten so addicted to just using those regular platforms. Let's take that then and just stamp out that same design everywhere around the building, and we should have our arch. All right, that does it for the basic shape here. Again, all I've done is repeat that exact same pattern, and I'm actually pretty happy about how these 3x3s are working out. Because once we're inside here, what I'm going to do is probably decorate them with, or the braziers. Within here, it's almost like indoor lighting that could be stacked up all the way across. And maybe we've got enough clearance, we could potentially put statues in there. That's going to be a cool look from inside the building. In fact, we could even put braziers down here and then put statues up top above that. Yeah, that I think is the way to go. You can see here with the 3D build, one of the tricky parts you run into is seeing what you're doing. Eventually you just get so much built, you're always peering through other buildings. Now, before I unleash the beavers and start building this, or at least continue planning the archway, we are going to need a lot of metal. Probably more metal than we've got here, because what do we have? 700 metal. Yeah, that's not going to cut it. Not for this type of construction, especially since I destroyed all our metal production. Well, good thing we've got a giant factory floor here, and it looks like they are more or less don't have anything to do. So I think now would be a great time to maybe figure out how to lay out these buildings for real here and start some of the factory production. One of the first things I'm thinking about is what to put where. And you can see in this design, I've got it split into wings and the main floor. And the wings are a little bit more narrow. So I'm thinking instead of putting, say, the 4 wide buildings in here, or the 4 long buildings, that's not going to give me a lot of space to work with. If I needed to put temporary storage or things like that, I'm leaning to putting all of our small buildings over on the side wings here. For example, maybe I could do something like this, where I just have like a long run of all the buildings I could potentially need all the way down. So say one of these sides can be dedicated to plank production, and maybe the other side over here could be dedicated to gear production. Now, as I look at this, that does block off the tube-way station, but I could just rearrange everything here to maybe fit some tube-way stations here, and then that gives me a nice run down like this for the road. And then I can come up with a way to get the tube-way station, to get a tube-way underneath this road to connect here in the subfloor. The one thing I would like to do is I'd like to have easy access to really short-term industrial piles. So imagine if I had haulers carting in the requirements for these buildings. I want them really, really close so that the people in these buildings don't have to walk far for logs. So I wonder if we could use the subfloor for that as well. Like this subfloor has to have some way to get power to these buildings. But I could also stick in some storage buildings in the subfloor here and there for where I don't need power. And then I could have haulers cart in all the dependencies into that location. So let's do that. Let's figure out our subfloor situation and figure out where we can put this. First off, we know that we're going to need tube-ways over here to our tube-way stations. And now we need power access to everything. Well, that's going to be easier than you might think, because tube-way stations do support and transfer power. So as long as I get power to one of these buildings this entire run, the entire run of buildings is going to be powered. So maybe we can go over here to where power is entering, the entryway up here, one of these runs. And I think we could just run this all the way down over here, run that down to just below one of those buildings, and then rebuild the building on top. Good, that's going to work really nicely. So if this gives us our plank production, I'm just going to walk to the other end of the building and then line all of this up with gear production. I don't think we actually need this many gears, but we can just pause the buildings that we're not using. In terms of where to put the intermediate storage, I think I could sneak in one right around here in the subfloor. That's going to be close enough to our tube-way station that we should be able to get service to it, and gives me a little space here to add a stairwell down to reach it. We've got power running to everything, we've got intermediate storage, really accessible, very quick access to tube-ways everywhere, and this is going to free up the main central warehouse for all the other buildings that we need. With those operational though, we can go ahead and delete all the temporary lumber mills I had up here. We do need lumber, but we don't need that much lumber. And while all the beavers pick up all that scrap and shuttle it around, we can start thinking what we want to do with Ernest on this factory floor. So right now, the two most important things that I really need for production are metal blocks and extract. Those are key. Metal blocks we're going to need for our construction, and extract we need always running for our population, because we need to feed into our birthing pods up on top of our water tower over here. So let's come up with a nice floor plan here. And unfortunately, that is the danger of holding down shift when you delete things. Well, that was a costly mistake. Well, there is something I wanted to do while I have this open, and that's that I was going to break up the subfloor to have another quick jump way to connect the two ends of this factory with a tube-way. I've got power coming up here and here. I can do that. Wow. That was a really costly mistake on my part. I could go and rebuild it in dev mode or reload a save, but fair is fair. We'll just queue that up and get it rebuilt. As soon as I released my mouse button, I saw the preview for how much was going to be deleted, and I realized I had made a really bad mistake. We have a ton of planks, so we can get that built quickly. And mistake fixed, let's delete those temporary roads again. Just being a little bit more careful this time. To begin, let's take stock of what I still need built. I'm gonna need some wood workshops. Probably gonna need a few smelters in here, and I definitely do need a lot more centrifuges. I think potentially I could throw in number crunchers as well. I don't really need them. There are a few things I don't have unlocked yet. And, you know, if I really needed to, I could put down bots, but I'm not using bots this playthrough, so I might skip them. I've gotten as far as I could at 500 population, and really, any more population is just going to start slowing this game down, so I might just completely skip bots this playthrough. Other than that, I think that is the last of the manufacturing we need. All our food manufacturing is in this giant tower over here. So this is really just more of our industrial manufacturing that goes here. So I think these 4 buildings are it. Now, in terms of laying them out, you'll notice that this building is symmetrical along one axis. So this line right here is the very center of the building. So with all these buildings being like an even number, it doesn't quite line up. What I think I'm going to do is reserve the center of the building for decorations and run the 4-length buildings all the way down like this. Then I could do some sort of decoration up in here with statues or something in the middle. That gives me enough space over here to have a nice road connecting everything. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. The other building I have is a 3x3, and I do have enough 3x3 space to fit in right in these areas. But there's one thing holding me back, and that's if I do this, I don't have any great space for intermediate storage. And what I mean by that is these buildings, when I create them, they're going to need goods that are coming in and out. And I'll probably have a bunch of those goods in the attic. But I don't want each of these workers to have to run over to the attic and grab them and come back down. Instead, what I would like to do is maybe have a couple of very short, small warehouses nearby for all the workers to get to, and I could potentially have haulers populating these. That way these guys don't have to walk as far to get things done. So to make space for that, what I'm thinking is I could just extend the platforms down here behind everything. And now I've got 4 spaces to work with over here. Now I can fit these just back a little bit from the road, and that gives me some space on this road to put in some of those like intermediate storage buildings. Next up, you'll notice that I started to put some tubeways down here, and that's because I need to figure a way to get up to the attic. So the attic is going to be on top of this building, where this arch is eventually going to be. Now, in order to get the tubeway up here, I think I need to run it up this side, somewhere around this tubeway station, or anywhere down this line here, really. And then, if I can get up to here, I should be able to run it around the edge of the roof. As you can see on the view here, you'll see that we could run it underneath one of these and then work our way up. So that's the idea with the attic access. And I think it would work to have maybe 4 access points to the attic. So I'm thinking next to each one of these tubeway stations. So I think that plan works. Let's go with it, and I'm just going to start laying these buildings out. And this is fairly overkill for what I need, but we're going to go with this. If I was going to be really exact, what I should be doing is counting my resources coming in with the potential draw of resources from the intermediate buildings. So I can already tell right here, I probably have more centrifuges than I need given the bad water coming in, and the same with probably my metal, because I only have 1 mine. But if I were to bring this other mine online, the story might be different, especially as I start increasing, to an efficient recipe now that I have more supplies available. Since I'm lazy at the moment and I don't want to think too hard about math, I'm just going to build a lot of buildings. Now, before I send them off to build all of this, I think I just need to use my subfloor and then make sure each of these factories is connected to power. This just takes a little bit of tinkering with the 3D view to see where I need power, and a nice shortcut is using Alt and the mouse wheel just to jump down one layer so I can see what's going on. Now you can see I made another couple of minor adjustments here. One of the things I did differently from the original plan is I added a few extra intermediate storage, and these are mainly for the outputs of the building. I'm still going to put down some small warehouses in this little run here to get access to them. So I'm just going to take a little moment to get all these configured and hooked up, and then we can go on to planning the next floor. And now we just give them a little bit of time to build everything. I have a feeling that I'm going to have to add some like access points here or there to get into the subfloor, just because I built my power shafts after I built all the buildings. So I think they're going to build the buildings and then prevent themselves from building access. One of the nice things about the subfloor is you really only need to build like a staircase in one spot, and that will give them access to the other parts with some roads. And that about does it. That's looking nice and dense. Now, unfortunately, you'll notice there's a few of these buildings or a few of these things I haven't finished yet, and it all has to do with metal. As you can imagine, that is our bottleneck right now. I have all these smelters going, which that's a good sign, but they're quickly burning through all of our scrap. So I think a couple things that we should do. One, I'm going to go and make sure that our efficient mines are switched over to efficient recipes that we have access to because we're Iron Teeth. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring online this other mine down here so we can have even more scrap coming in. While I'm at it, I'm also going to make sure that I have easy access to the two-way station, which I've already got running down at the bottom of the road. I'm going to set it back just a little bit from the edge of the road though, because I do want this nice atrium down at the very bottom run here, and I don't want that two-way station blocking it. With all the industry running though, it's time to move up this structure. I want to start working on the roof. Now this one is going to be a little bit trickier because we need access to build it. The easiest way would probably be to involve cranes in some form. And we do have easy access via two ways here, so I could probably make some shapes that start overhanging in different ways. And honestly, I probably don't need cranes everywhere. Once I get to the foundation of one of these, I think it's going to be like chain reaction. It'll run all the way through. So maybe I just need crane access to each of the foundations here on one side. So let's get that started. And given that metal blocks are my shortage, I'm also not going to go super extreme and make those giant overbearing cranes that I normally do. I'm going to just try to make these simple and quick. And as we get to the roof, that should cause a chain reaction of being able to build at least this half of the building. That takes care of this side of the building. I still need to get the other side set up somehow. Now, for that, there's a couple things I could do. I could make just like a very long crane all the way from this side of the building to the other. But instead, I'm wondering if I can make use of these two ways I've got here. They are pretty close to where I need to go. So what I'm thinking is if I were to raise up these all the way up to the top, I could make the foundation for a crane right adjacent to it. And it's just a little bit short, but I think something like that would be able to reach all the way across. Because as soon as I can get one set of two-way stations up on the platform there, I should be able to make other bridges over to the next columns. I do enjoy cranes and I use them quite a bit, but sometimes I find it easier just to use like very short runs like this. A couple of days later, and we've got the rest of this run down. I want to get it completely covered in so that the beavers can't get rained on. Now, as I look at this, there's something that I had in mind. I want to make skylights into the building itself. Because ultimately the long-term plan still is to cover this roof up with dirt and then turn it green. But if I do that, this is just going to be one solid block. So what I was thinking of doing is mixing in slits on the side here so that the beavers would have, I guess, theoretically light coming down through the edges. So if you imagine something like every other block here was maybe transparent like that, and then the next one was regular ground again. You can imagine eventually we're going to come up with dirt in here like this, and everything else would be covered except for that little segment right there. Right? And then so from within here, you should be able to look up through there and get a little touch of light. That's more or less the plan that I'm thinking of. So to me, that just says we're going to have to come up with a plan of alternating those skylights every way down. And if we're lucky, this is going to work out just right to put those two ways through some of the lights. And unfortunately, it doesn't line up just right with the end there, but you know what? I can live with that in exchange for the two ways just lining up just perfectly. So let's get those all run down on both sides of the building, and then fill in all the gaps with regular platforms. And then we can start working on the actual overhang for the archway. What my plan is going to be is, as we get each corner of this archway done, I'm just going to make stairs up to the next layer, and we're going to work our way all the way up. Unfortunately, we're still running low on metal blocks, and at this point also trees. So construction might slow up a little bit here. Honestly, since we're running so short of trees, that's happened a few times in our construction lately. I wonder if I should use this time to go make use of the space down here. You can see with this construction, I got all this massive green space back. You know, this could be another good spot to have additional trees being grown. So I think I'm going to throw down a couple of foresters scattered through this area, and then also throw down a few lumberjacks. And then finally, I'm going to spam a lot of this with oaks. You know, ultimately, this is pretty overkill, and I don't think I'm going to use all of these, but it uses up the space. I can always tear them out and replace them with something else later. It also gives our beavers a little something to do while we build up some more metal blocks. With more trees in our future, though, I'm just going to queue up the construction of the rest of this rooftop. And in terms of building it, I'm just going to add a few stairwells up the edge of the arch as we go up in a few places. And the roof is completed. And this shows you how much quicker construction can go when you've got like all the resources present. As you can see, what I did off camera is I waited a few days just to build our stockpile up again before I allowed the beavers to start working on the roof. And things just went so much faster. You can also see that we've started to get a couple of the trees down in the basement filled in, and that's going a long way to helping our construction effort. And with the roof filled in, this actually looks pretty cool. I'm liking the way this is turning out. This is probably the most open building I've done. We've got this giant hangar here. I like how this access point, the two ways turned out. That looks pretty good. We've got a nice dense run of factories. And then we've got something similar downstairs now. You can see here we've got the trees, we've got this nice atrium. I think the only thing I still need to do down here is I want to put statues around the edges. But I like how these turned out, these pillars of industry. That's pretty nice. But the next thing on the agenda is going to be figuring out the roof. So like I mentioned earlier, I want to fill this in with dirt in some way and grow a garden on top. And then in addition to the greenway, what I'd like to do is almost build a type of storage town up on top right here. And that's what I'm going to be calling the attic. But I think that is going to have to wait until next time. As you see, I've already been recording this for about 6 hours, and I would like to take a break. I'm definitely liking how this is turning out. I do think it needs that green there to look just a little bit finished. Otherwise, it looks a little bit plain. Next episode, I'm looking forward to that. I don't think it'll take a full episode to wrap up this building, so I'll probably start looking at doing something else. Probably moving into starting to finish up and clean up the rest of this map. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how the factory's turning out. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope to catch you next time.